one of the things that we get out of Mel's story that so many other bios are missing, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just the nature of how this works, and that is the sheer amount of time that's been put into
Shout out to
building
Zillion.
this character. Yeah, Zillion, you like he's been doing the work behind the scenes. We're officially changing the credit to the story to Zillion.
Welcome to Casuals of Runeterra, episode 168. I'm your host, Ryan, here with the other host, Edge.
168. That is a big number.
Yeah, and considering a large portion of our collection is in one of our numbered episodes, I don't know if we hit 250 episodes yet. Probably close. But yeah, if you guys have been here if you've been rocking with us since episode 1, congratulations. That's insane.
Yeah. Also, just tell us why. Just general curiosity. Like,
yeah. And we're also interested to see if you like how the show has evolved over time. Because let's pat ourselves on the back a bit. And I think I went back to listen to our first episode. Sound quality was pretty solid, right? Not as good as now, but we got better. The organization of the episodes is a bit longer, a bit looser. But we got there. We got the information out there. It holds up. It feels like a modern. I mean, if you listen to other podcasts, there's such a variety of quality out there.
Oh, the variety's so
yeah, it's just us
now,
two guys, right? So yeah, let us know if you like the quality now better than before, or if you like the more raw.
And if you haven't listened to those episodes, I borderline them like, don't worry about it, because I remember my microphone and my dumbass just breathing into it. We could all forget that happened.
Yeah, and once our lives are more in place again, we plan on going back to some of that earlier content and, redoing it or doing like an updated episode, because so much has changed in the 6 years we've been recording. I think I've used up all the time at the beginning of the episode. Housekeeping. You can listen to us everywhere. Visit us at podcastcore.com for all of our info. Email us at the same name at gmail.com. Follow us on all the platforms, because that helps us with discoverability. We appreciate it. And then leave a like and comment wherever you listen the most. But word of mouth has gotten us this far, so tell a friend to experience the 5 stages of grief by listening to the Casuals of Runeterra podcast.
No, that intro makes me think that this is going to be a really fun romper. We're just going to laugh our butts off here. Ugh.
So we're talking about Mel, and it's her bio, and this came out right before Arcane did. So, if you were stuck in our time spiral where you were trying to catch up to the current episodes, you're here. And we do want to put up top that this episode specifically will have spoilers for season 2 Arcane. So if you haven't watched it, if you haven't listened to all of our episodes, just know that before we say any more. All right, your time's up. And this story is also written by Taylor Din-widdie. So I mentioned him. He's one of the newer guys at Riot. Young whippersnapper, up and comer. There's like 2 others that we've mentioned in previous episodes about how there's this collective effort now rather than just individual authors picking up stories, because they're trying to, keep the retcons they're doing from Arcane in line as they build out this new world of League of Legends that we're getting to experience. So this seems to be his first major project on his own, and then the content of this is basically, this is a letter from Mel to her now deceased mother, Mbessa.
And this is going to be one of the more interesting bios that we do as far as like format wise, because I do love like the creative approach to this of it being a letter, but it's also different and set apart from the others, because even some of the other stories that are done in first person, they still feel like a biography, right? Like they still are giving an outline to that character's bio.
Yeah.
This is not one of those. This is legitimately just Mel writing down her thoughts as she is returning to Noxus post the events from Arcane season 2. So this is one of the ones where it's like, hey, like if you want the actual bio information, you need to go watch Arcane.
Yeah.
which is
Or listen
very
to our
interesting.
episodes.
Ooh, yes, yes. Podcastcore@gmail.com. Uh, but I do enjoy like the creativity behind it. But if you were here looking for an actual bio, this is not it.
No, yeah, it bridges the gap. It literally bridges the gap between the end of season 2 and the first trailer of Welcome to Noxus we got. So let's get into it. Part 1. All good stories told in 3 parts. We start with Mel mentioning that she received her mother's battle-damaged mask as a gift from one of the soldiers. We saw that in the episodes of Arcane. And then as she looks at it, it kind of sinks in that despite her mother surviving countless battles through her life, she truly was gone for good this time. There was no, Ambessa made it out by the skin of her teeth in this one, or she survived, or she came back from the dead and crawled out of grave. That's done. She's gone, right? It's very real. She died on camera. And Mel knows that despite all this, her mother would be proud of her actions, but she's not sure why her mother decided this outcome, like why it had to be pushed to this extent for her mother to be satisfied.
Yeah, and with as far as with the like the actual details here is also like Mel trying to come to terms with the identity of what Ambessa wanted. Because where you return to the references of the wolf and the fox, and we know that Ambessa was trying to make the wolf. And once we start going deeper into the letter, Mel is immediately being like, well, I lived the way that I knew how, which was as the fox. So there's a lot of introspection in this, just the beginning of this letter.
Yeah, so she thinks back to, a decade ago when her mother sent her to stay with her cousin Jago in Piltover, and she felt this emptiness from the thought of, a mother not wanting her daughter, regardless of what the reason was. And despite this betrayal, Mel still sought her mother's approval while in Piltover, and she would do so, as Hetch mentioned, like the swift, cunning fox. And this takes us to part 2, where she mentions that, she had the trust of the council, she gained power in Piltover, but her mother's distrust of her process intervened and ruined everything. We saw this, right? We saw this happen throughout, obviously, season 1, so we get to see her doing her job, but season 2, where it was like, we know Mel is capable. We even knew, we thought Mel was capable before she became a main character, and we liked her from the get-go. And we were interested to see what she would, what she would become and what her goal was. Because, some people were just like, it was a very well told narrative of, hey, what's Mel up to? And then in this letter, we get this representation of this is the part of the anger, right? This is part of anger and frustration. You remember the 5 stages of grief. And in the actual writing in the story, Mel crosses out a line in the letter where it seems like she wants to blame her her mother's death purely on this stubbornness, but she knows that there were more factors at play that led up to the way her mother died, rather than just being, see, this is what you get for not trusting me, mom. It's not that simple.
I really enjoy like the fact that they actually have it written out with the lines crossed out as far as showing Mel going through this grieving process, because it helps you to like actually connect with Mel, but it also kind of shows like the part of her that is like Noxian. Like that this to me this is like that kind of more Ambessa behavior, because it gives off the tone of her saying to Ambessa of like, look what you made me do.
Yeah.
And that's more of an Ambessa thing of trying to control how her family is working or how her troops are working around her, right? So it really helps you to connect with Mel, but also is just like, oh yeah, you're like your mom. Like there's pieces of your mom in there too. It's a very human thing. It's nice.
Yeah, and we have a constant through line if you've listened to a lot of our episodes when we talk about characters that are the black sheep of their culture, black sheep of their region, and how they differ and kind of, take their experiences into a modern era, right? Or take it overseas or across the lands and interact with other cultures, that no matter how much they change, just like so many of us, that trauma is so deep rooted inside of them, and certain features of their personalities will always resonate that. It's a human thing, right? So it's shown here with Mel, and also because of how Noxian culture works, her now being the head of this regiment, right? The head of the Medardas, because whether you like it or not, that's just the way it works. She's ready to take that mantle with a grain of salt. And, this leads us to our next section here where it's like, deep down, Mel knows that Ambessa was always focused on protecting her and her brother in her own twisted way, right? But she empathizes with the rare feeling that her mother had of fear when being hunted by the Black Rose. And Mel feels that fear wasn't just for herself, it was for Mel and Kino, because Ambessa knew that they were her weaknesses, and she also knew her biggest enemy now was the Black Rose. So there's a lot of things there where even the finally seeing the fear in her mother helped her fear the consequences of the Rose less, right? And we see that as she's going to Noxus, she has her head up. Like, she's like, listen, I'm going to go in here. I'm going to be myself. I'm going to do my thing, and I'll die trying. And I have no qualms about it. And it's not like Mel did all the personal work to get there. It's kind of like she inherited that's resolve from her mother dying and kind of handing it over in a way. I don't know if I'm explaining that well.
No, I'm picking up what you're putting down, because it really is a thing of like, this is all, we also have to consider that this is all after like Mel has not just like put the pieces together of what Ambessa was doing and why Ambessa was doing the things she was doing, but this is also after Mel has had firsthand contact with the Black Rose. So the fact that it's like this is her attitude, like after kind of seeing the reach that the Black Rose has, because let's not forget, she's one of the highest standing members in Piltover society, and she gets kidnapped without a trace. Like that's already like a scary level of power.
Yeah.
But this is also after Mel discovers her own power and has to use that power against an agent of the Black Rose to try to, at least hold on to some piece of Ambessa. So I don't think that like she would still have like that same attitude if it wasn't for that connection that she had with Ambessa, as far as the kind of the passing on the baton of like the head of the Medarda spirit, because it's like, oh, I now understand a bit more of what you were doing. It was because of fear, and now I got to see what you were afraid of. And yeah, that it's a good reason to be afraid, but we have the strength to fight it. Like that's kind of the torch that was passed on, or at least that's how I kind of perceive it.
Yeah. I mean, we're getting, obviously, as we like to do, we get ahead of ourselves, right? Because welcome to Noxus, we got a trailer, and we're like, all right, we've seen the whole season, right? Like, we're trying to figure the whole thing out. And as we'll talk about in a later episode, it goes deeper. But we're going through the stages of grief here, right? And it's a very messy experience if you've ever lost someone. So Mel switches back into more of a feeling of defiance. And she kind of mentions that she doesn't regret protecting Piltover from Ambessa, right? She would do it all over again. And it was as her mother's creed stated, what she imposed on the Medardas is that you should be the wolf, always be the wolf. And Mel, for one time, let herself be the wolf, and that resulted in her mother's death. But ultimately, isn't that what you wanted, right? And then once again, Mel wonders that did her mom ever consider at any moment that what she wanted for Mel would be worse off? The outcome would be worse if she got what she wanted for Mel versus if Mel got what she wanted for herself. Because as Hetch mentioned, either way, Mel believes they could reach their goal.
Yeah. And unfortunately, like now Mel is having to kind of do the thinking and planning of reaching that goal solo. And I think that's also part of why like we get this bio in this letter form, because all of a sudden she's now on an island once she finally understood what island Ambessa was on. So it's such an interesting situation. So this is why we pointed out the Arcane spoiler. Could you imagine listening to this without having watched the show?
So this takes us to part 3, and now Mel is upset. And she's upset mainly because Ambessa kept so much important information from her as someone who's very good at using information. And, she kept the truth about her father from her. She kept Kino's murderer from her, and the extent of the involvement with the Black Rose from her. That's a lot of very important information for someone who, remember, she sent her away not as a baby. She was a teenager. So, and she's a Noxian teenager. So what she could have been exposed to is so much more than her mother gave her credit for, which is, part of the overall problem we've spoken about to this point. And then, this entanglement has now passed on to Mel, and she has to resolve to uncover all of her mother's secrets that she didn't tell her. Because if the ones she finally found out about right now are this big, what didn't she know, right? Because none of this really points out the weakness part. Like, she knows the Black Rose had something on her mother, but like, to what extent? There was so much of her life that her mother was out there doing campaigns and God knows what. And we're going to talk about a character, in a couple episodes that had a lot of influence in most of Runeterra in a very long period of time. And he appears in Arcane as well. But it's like, when you don't know that stuff, how can you take on their mantle and then fix it?
Right. And not to mention, as far as like the attempt to fix it, but it's also just the scope of what is to fix. Because even if you fix all of the things that we've just pointed out within this letter of like Kino's murder, the involvement with the Black Rose, why Mel was sent away, even if we solve the issues that cause those questions and those things to occur, is that all that happened? Because what else was hidden? We don't know how deep it goes. Mel doesn't know how deep it goes either. And that's why it's turning into more anger and being upset, because that is a lot to try to figure out when you can't ask the person who has the answers.
Yeah, and her mother lived for, like, remember, the depiction of, yes, Ambessa's attractive. We're all on board. But the thing is, she's also an older woman, which means as someone who was on the front line as a soldier and leader, to live to the age Ambessa was at with no plans of dying anytime soon, she could have done a lot of shit. And she's like bumping around Runeterra willy-nilly through the support of the Noxian army. So that's part of why we're so excited for Mel's adventures and her being chosen as the next protag, right? The focal point of the narrative, because just like Ambessa passing on her mantle in a way here as a Medarda, she's also passing on her storyline to Mel, right? To inherit, which means it opens up so many, we talk constantly about how you can cross stories over, how do we get this character in a, correct way, because there are correct ways and wrong ways to do things when it comes to storytelling. But Mel kind of gives you this carte blanche in a very responsible way to tell some pretty cool stories. But I digress. We'll talk more in the discussion. She mentions that her mother is watching down on her up to her. I don't know how this works, but from what essentially seems to be their form of Valhalla, which is Volruknun, I believe.
Yeah.
Listen,
and I am going to, like, hang on, let me curl my mustache a little bit so that I can be evil here.
Yeah.
And be like, well, actually, because we've talked about this place on the show before. So Volruknun is an ancient religion from some of the older tribes pre-Noxus. And it is a religion that is very warrior caste based, and it rewards for soldiers for like dying in battle and prowess and blood overall. And it is the religion that a certain warrior who died, who does not remember his actual name anymore.
Oh my gosh.
That is what he dedicated his entire life and death to, and got pissed when he found out it wasn't real. So this is a religion that Mordekaiser believed in. It is a very old religion in Noxus. So I was very excited to see that. It's like, oh, hey, like, they believe in Valraknan. So like that warrior culture that we always harp on when we're talking about Noxus, it's not just something that survived because of the many tribes and the fact that they were warlike.
Yeah.
There is religion behind it that survived all this time. So this is a very interesting reference to the rest of the Runeterra, which is nice.
Yeah, and this is why we're teammates here. This is because I'm happy here because I totally forgot the name of it, and Hetch just brought up a good point that we actually can't talk about until a couple episodes from now, but we'll get there. We'll try to do it next episode. I think is the one that's going to be referential and makes sense because there's going to be more depth to why that religion ever existed in the first place, right? And was it man-made? Was it always there? Who knows? We'll get there. But yeah, so she mentions that her mother is there and watching on to see how she progresses through the world with this new mantle. And then Mel plans to toss this letter into the water. She can't, deliver it to her mother. She's not going to hold on to it. She's writing it, tossing it in the water so that as she gets closer to Noxus, it will reach the shores of her homeland in Rewritten, which we've talked about in previous episodes.
Yeah, and as far as with this, like the fact that she's having it dropped into the waters while sailing back to Noxus, this kind of reaffirms a theory that we had back before really getting into season 2 of Arcane, which was that the Medardas more likely than not came from Shurima. This is something that we've always kind of theorized because of the nature of Noxus and imperial nations. Mm-hmm. And this kind of, for me, this kind of solidifies it. Because the fact that like Piltover is the middle point between Shurima and Noxus, and for the most part, the Noxians are sailing to Shurima. So it's like this, it's not concrete evidence, but it's good enough for me. And as we've said many times on this show, we make the rules, so now it's canon.
Foolish riot. You think you're in control. It is I.
It is I, the great Hetch.
Podcast.core.com. I just thought of Aqua Teen Hunger Force and BillyWitchDoctor.com for some reason. We digress again, but we wrap up this story with Mel knowing that, she's entering a nation that's the antithesis of what she believes and how she sees the world. And she's doing so with now a regiment or guards that deep down don't believe her to be a true Medarda. And she still plans on surviving the way she knows how, as the cunning fox. And she plans on changing the nation to fit that vision or die trying. And that's it's one of those resolves that it doesn't come across as cheesy or ham-fisted because they've worked for it, right? Those 2 seasons of Arcane, as a new character, basically, they've made Mel a character worthy of saying this statement without us rolling our eyes to it, and instead allowing us to get excited at what she's willing to do. So, to give us a great story.
Yeah, and that point right there just highlights like one of the things that we get out of Mel's story that so many other bios are missing. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just the nature of how this works. And that is the sheer amount of time that's been put into
shout out to
building
Zillion.
This character. Yeah, Zillion, he's been doing the work behind the scenes. We're officially changing the credit to the story to Zillion. but yeah, no, when you invest time into something, that is an investment, and as long as it's a wise investment, you could always get a return on something. So the fact that they invested all the time into building Mel's character is why it doesn't feel ham-fisted. And it's like Mel is such a cool character. I couldn't think of anyone else that I would prefer to really be following into Noxus.
Yeah.
And I spoke at large years ago of how cool it would be to follow Swain.
Yeah.
But the work they put into Mel is okay, yeah, no, I'll follow you wherever you go with Mel. Let me just turn the camera on and let me just enjoy the show.
Yeah. And that's the end of the story. Now we get into the general discussion section. We have a few things we want to touch on. So the first one here is, did Ambessa's stubbornness and desperation cause a worse situation for Mel? So for me, yeah. But it's one of those things of, when you're from a warrior nation, especially in a leadership position, with your own trauma that Mel has from her upbringing, which we learn more about in the book and all that stuff. We'll get there in due time. But almost, it seems like it's not always the easy path or the least resistant path that they follow. Sometimes they want to pick the poor decisions because of the fight that it entails, because it's kind of intuitive to their nature, right? To not take the easy path, to kind of grind uphill to get what you need to get, and to have it as a bragging point to be like, hey, even though I did it the hard way, I did it, right?
Yeah. And the fact that like you're constantly forcing yourselves into making the harder choice is reinforcing your own philosophies of might makes right.
Yeah,
Because like yes, this is a harder path. It's going to cost more, like both as far as like resources as well as time.
great
But
point. Great point.
it doesn't matter because like the message that we will be sending is that we are stronger
Yeah,
than them, and that is the whole point. It's not necessarily because it's the right thing to do, it's because it's the mightiest thing to do. It's all about control.
yeah,
And I think that's one of the reasons why I agree with you that Ambessa definitely made it harder for Mel, and it's because Ambessa was trying to control all of it.
yeah.
Like not just control the situation that the Medardas were in, but trying to control how the rest of the Medardas acted within that
Hmm.
situation. That's why she sent Mel away, because it's like, oh, I'm having trouble controlling you because I'm trying to tell you to act like a wolf, and you're doing everything but acting like a wolf.
Yeah.
You're acting like a fox, and since I'm trying to do the wolf thing, I can't control you, so I'm going to take you out of the picture.
Yep.
And so it's all about like that control, but no one has true control. No one.
Yeah.
And now that Mbess is out of the picture, all those things she's trying to control, like no one knows what she was doing with it. And
Yeah.
so it's such a hard pickle to be in now because, okay, we don't even have all the information, but if we had all the information, the formula is wrong
And
because we don't have the formula.
and when you talk about the moving pieces, one thing we mentioned before is, now that we have a confirmation that the Medardas are a large family, they're not just a large family, they're also like an orphan family, where essentially, like, a lot of families in Noxus aren't similar to like a family, a royalty family in Demacia or in Piltover, because they're all from different tribes, different locations. So, like Jago, right? Jago doesn't have dark skin like the rest of them, right? He's from a different area. So we'll learn more about like how that family is made up, but especially when you're trying to seek control in a situation where everyone's from a different place, but you're a family, kind of in bond only, not just purely in blood. So it's more than that. She took a big task on, which kind of, it fit her personality, right? She was raised to be that way, so she was that way.
Yeah. And we also get to see that orphan family ideology in other Noxian stories as well. Like, Annie probably being our most famous one that we've talked
Yeah,
about because she definitely an orphan now, and with her powers, a lot of strong families are paying attention to her. But the best example would be Talon. Talon was a street. Our favorite backstory, orphan on the street. But now he's in the same family as Katerina and Cassiopeia as a trained assassin. Like, sure, he's not running for succession, but that that's the only reason we know of Talon, is because he was absorbed by a group of rich people.
yeah,
Like that that's definitely like the Medardas aren't going to be immune to that,
yeah,
but I think it is going to be just a little bit different because of like we still don't know like what kind of culture their actual homeland had and what parts of their current culture is Noxian versus the native, right?
Yeah. I mean, even Jay Medarda, we got a card in Runeterra. He's a Medarda as well,
Yeah.
but he's kind of, you see the picture and you see like the little bit we got of him, right, depicted for the first time. He's more of an adventurer type. He's hanging out with the Yordle. He's going and finding stuff, kind of like an Ezreal. So the Medarda, what a Medarda is so wide reaching that that's what makes Ambessa's goal to make them kind of your stereotypical military, power hungry, like oligarchy type family didn't really fit, because that's not really like, yeah, that's a part of what it means to be Noxus, but it's not everything, because Noxus is a part of everything else.
And I'm so glad that like you're using Jay Medarda as a reference, because like once you are hearing Ambessa trying to be like the the Noxian war family, then it's like take those words and then the picture of Jay Medarda's card, and be like, all right, make this guy a Noxian warrior. And it's like, absolutely not. Like I could see him getting like an alternate card art where he's in a boy band with Jace. Like that's like it. I like put them in a classic rock music video, like doing the Tom Cruise Top Gun thing. That's Jay Medarda fits that.
You know what? I'm gonna read the flavor text on that card from back then. Even though we don't do cards anymore, but now that we're talking about Jay a little bit, because it's one of the few ones that you have easy access to see more information about. So it says his flavor for his card was heir apparent to Piltover's prestigious clan Medarda. Jay preferred hunting ancient artifacts over managing the family business, much to his father's chagrin. So, there's different types of rebellion within the family itself, but the family is made up of many parts. So that's one cool thing. The next part is, Rewritten obviously being a type of Valhalla, right? And then it as a religion kind of gives you the concept of, okay, well, is this technically the best we get to a heaven, right? Because we do have a concept of hell through Neela. We know that exists, but we don't have like, a antithesis to it. So this is probably the closest thing, but this, I would say Rewritten is probably also hell too, right? Like I don't think of it as a heavenly place.
And like this is going to be like an interesting topic once we get like deeper into
the theology of Runeterra.
Yeah,
episode the theology 700.
Of Runeterra. but I'm gonna keep this show alive from a retirement home, even though I can't retire, but I need the assisted living.
None of us can. We'll keep doing damn podcasts.
But I gotta do that podcast.
We'll start the Patreon once we're in a retirement home.
But no, like that said, it will be interesting once we get more of the Noxian story, because one of the interesting things as far as like looking at the theology of Runeterra, like you brought up Neela, like Neela is a physical representation of the concept of a hell, right? Then we have like Shin. Shin is a physical representation of the spiritual world. We have characters like Lee Sin and Udyr, who are physical representations of, or at least like, they are living evidence and can provide evidence to like the land of the Freljord and the spiritual connections that are there. So
more of a naturalist approach,
Yeah, so the concept of like a heaven or an afterlife, that makes sense. What's going to be interesting is that in our current state, the only evidence that we have of Valkyrie is Mordekaiser's story. And his whole story is that he's fucking pissed that it's not real. Because he did everything right to get to Valkyrie. And then he ended up in a wasteland and gets so pissed he loses his identity and becomes the great necromancer Mordekaiser. So right now the evidence that we have for this Valhalla like place is that it's not real.
It's more of a purgatory type situation.
And the only reason that I'm like still being loose-ended about it is that it's like maybe, Mordekaiser didn't do everything right because we don't know what it took to get to Valkyrin. We know that Mordekaiser understood it as be the strongest warrior. And so, it's like shed the most blood and I'll get there.
Yeah.
But he didn't get there. So does that mean it is fake?
No achievement
like Mordekaiser says? Yeah. No, where's my achievement? So it's like, does it mean that it's fake and Mordekaiser's right?
Yeah.
Or does it mean that he's wrong and that's not how you get there? So with that, it would be like, maybe we get more information about the religion, and once we get more of the Noxian story, maybe we get a character who is more tightly connected to it, and we actually get to see Valkyrin.
Yeah.
Kind of like how we get to see the spirit world through Shin's eyes. That's going to be an interesting thing to see, because right now it's not about like what do we think what Valkyrin is. It's more of like, okay, well, what do we think about the survival of religion in Noxus? Because it's definitely feeling more of just like, yo, God is dead. Burn the churches.
I mean, even we've talked at length in our Targon sections about how, even Celestials are not technically considered gods. That whole space up there is hell itself, right? We know deep within the water that's not good either. There's no place salvation as represented. So who knows? It's one of those things I always think about. And then the final part, because we've already made this 37 minutes somehow, is that,
our discussion started pre-30 minutes.
Yeah. So if you're still here, you want to be here. So hang out.
Yeah. And we appreciate you, but we're also not accepting responsibility for the amount of time.
So at this point, through the amount of content we've gone through, it's been pretty clear that Riot wants Piltover, Noxus, and Shurima to have deep links. These seem to be this trifecta that they're very focused on, whether they talk about how the ports work between the two, who controls the ports, immigration between the two places or refugees from the two places, and how those interact. Shurima obviously being a core to the history of all of Runeterra. There's so much there that I'm happy they're making it clear that, hey, we like these three areas together as a story, let's say section, or like a story combo.
I think it's more that it's like not even as a story combo, and it's just more of like this is them acknowledging the geography. Because like we've talked about the map a lot, but the map I think is so far has only been important to us. Now we're getting to see that the map is really being integrated here, because when you look at this part of the map, it's going to be crazy amounts of traffic, because it's like that's how Piltover kind of became as great of a city as it is and becoming its own sovereign state. This is how Noxus, or like the shortest point that Noxus can actually move logistically, into Shurima. And it's like this is also how like the gods of Shurima, characters like Janna, actually got to like around the rest of the world, as well as like people just constantly traveling here because it has some of the oldest history, or at least like the oldest recorded history in Runeterra. So it to me it feels more of like this is like this is going to be like the Palestine of Runeterra. And I mean, we've been very clear about our opinions on that, but that's not what this discussion is about. Like and looking outside of the conflict, the reason that it's happening in Palestine is because where it's located geographically. It is in a very rich spot for both minerals and water, as far and other kind of resources over since all of written history in the real world. That's what I think Piltover is going to be in that section of Noxus and Shurima. That's how I view it, and they're doing a good job of laying that foundation. Because I mean, this is one of the top Noxian families, and they are tied to Shurima. And she hasn't been to Shurima as far as we know. It's pretty much through records that they know this, and that's actually a great point. I mean, if you've picked up what we've been putting down for 6 years, we've been trying to explain so much of why Piltover, Zon,
and that story was so important, and how they handled it so well with telling it, because when you do the parallel to the real world, that is the story, right? And Hetch and I, we will have an episode, because we've had some discussions about how we want the Shuriman story told. We differ greatly, but at some point that story will have to be told. And if you're part of our book club, and I brought it before, and you've listened to all of the Ruination book episodes, then you know in that episode I talk a lot about the importance of Shurima, and it kind of lays a bit of the groundwork for Runeterra. So we'll get there. This has already been 40 minutes. We'll leave it there. But as always, thanks for listening. We'll be back soon with the next episode.
Yeah, take care, everybody.